If our truest desire is to hold complexity without flinching or resisting, then it changes how we see connection itself. It creates a loophole in what we already know, an invitation to connect beyond programming. However, to connect beyond programming, we first have to experience high-charged, messy, and intense connections, especially during our developmental years when you're just becoming aware of your senses. This is why children and underdeveloped hearts are always the most vulnerable. They are wide open to default programming, and the default programming is obedience. It's being trained to think you're thinking for yourself while actually living out a script. It breeds unhinged energy that's always looking to be validated, approved, saved, clothed, sheltered, and fed. What's needed in the middle of these extremes is guidance. Guidance to help you discern, am I experiencing life as it is or as I've been told it should be? That kind of discernment matters, and it's a tool that allows you to build capacity to hold complexity. This means that you must accept, whether you agree or disagree, that everyone's perception is valid. And yet perception itself is not neutral. It's constantly shaped by programming, by preference, and by expectations. Because each of us wants reality to go our way, perception itself gets challenged. That's why existence feels destabilizing. Programming, preference, and even identity are constantly being challenged. And so the paradox is that what most people fight to protect, which is their own way, is often not their truest desire at all. It's programming. And programming is rigid. It relies on binaries such as right, wrong, acceptable, unacceptable, success, failure, which slow down fluidity and distort authenticity, fracturing alignment. True desire then isn't about things going your way, it's about fluidity, the ability to change your mind at any given moment and still be clear. The ability to navigate shifts without abandoning yourself. This is what I've been seeing differently in my own connections. When people activate me, I no longer see the charge as an invitation to pursue or resist. I see the charge as ballot, and I immediately recognize its layers and where it may have been coming from, as well as the pattern it belongs to. Most people arrive at that realization slowly, but if you're like me, it happens almost instantly. And the ability to see through the charge is part of the role of being an in-between space holder. It's part of how you anchor fluidity inside a world that keeps trying to program rigidity. You see, most people search for a root cause, but it's rarely just one root. There's many roots in a whole garden or multiple spaces within an entire ecosystem. When you recognize one root or space and take responsibility for your part in it, you strengthen your ability to address the next one. Our differences aren't mistakes. They are training grounds. They're templates for the codes that show us how to be where we are. Whatever's meant to transform will transform, and each transformation becomes a dot that connects to another dot. That's why this isn't just about gender or the rightness or the wrongness or learning styles or just about one system. It's all connected. I notice things instantly, and others often notice things slowly. On the surface, this difference shouldn't matter, but programming turns it into a binary. Fast becomes good, slow becomes bad, or sometimes the reverse happens where my speed makes me bad and their slowness is good. Either way, the binary wins, and that's where the frustration lives. When there's a difference, programming teaches us to segregate it, to declare that one is right and one is wrong. And that's how obedience feels natural. The mind rests in a rigid category, but fluidity, which is the space in between, doesn't work like that. Fluidity invites you to pay attention to context, patterns and nuance and see that sometimes fast is what the moment needs and sometimes slow is what the moment needs. And neither one of them cancels each other out. The problem is most people only glimpse paradox in a moment of crisis. The binary feels safest, where you can clearly see the distortion between danger and safety, right and wrong. And instead of asking, well, what can I do right now to stop myself in the spiral? Or what is the actual context here? And if we're being really real, everything we do is a trauma response. Everything is a survival mechanism. But the binaries label it like this: trauma bad, survival bad, thriving good. And it's another layer of unnecessary segregation and another way of simplifying what's different. That's why surface level things are so addictive. They're easy to validate, easy to reward, easy to control. Pretty looks, enticing behavior, simple takes. Programming makes you think that that's the bigger truth, but it's just the most straightforward truth to package. And so, the clash continues. Binary thinking fuels debate, arguments, competition, and even war, because those things are controllable. But what can't be controlled? Stillness, fluidity. Binary thinking will have you believe that if you're not fighting, you're not living, that validation only comes through opposition, and this keeps the survival cycle running. It's not bad, it's just exhausting. And it's not evil, it's just misdirected. And survival doesn't need to be canceled out. It only needs to be seen for what it is. It's a stage, a pattern. And when you're aware of it, you don't stay in it longer than it takes for you to soften your grip. Many conversations are labeled controversial, and many of these topics are marked as sensitive. It's not because they truly are, but it's because programming trains you to see things in a binary way, which triggers your body's fight response. Fight mode causes cognitive dissonance. It's a neurological lock. It's backed up against a wall, panic rising, searching for safety as danger feels imminent. And then the same survival loop is playing out disguised as discourse. And if you're holding complexity, and if holding complexity were natural, if it were our baseline here, then what we call sensitive or controversial or even dangerous wouldn't hold the weight that we give it. It wouldn't even feel like a threat. This is why being a field anchor, a non-manipulative signal in a distorted field, can feel like exorcist labor. You are exorcising personalities, patterns, distortions that don't want to be seen. This also relates to how we discuss energetic cords, tethers, and soul ties. When we connect with someone, when we're activated by someone, a cord is established. The common language is, if it's toxic, cut the cord, but here's the reframe. You don't actually remove cords. Every connection remains tethered to your memory, your experience, your story. The clearing process isn't for severing the cord, it's for cleaning it. The toxicity isn't the cord itself, it's the dust on the cord, the patterning, the programming, the rigid binaries. All that is the debris, the mud that slows the surge. It hides the wire and it distorts the current. So, the work of holding complexity is to clean the cord, to see your role in it clearly, while also recognizing that the roles others are playing, to know we're all tethered in each other's story. And when you clean the pattern, you're no longer responsible for how someone else manages themselves in the tether. That's the boundary. You hold your own clarity, and whatever they do is theirs to carry. In our culture, romance is often conflated with sex because sex itself has been hijacked as a coping mechanism. And so for many, sex equals relief, escape, or validation, and rarely is it practiced as an honest opening. And that's the premise of the patriarchal masculine pattern. And it's gender neutral, by the way. Every gender, every orientation, every visible and invisible identity is subjected to that pattern. That's why we're so easily pulled into gender wars and orientation wars. We often soften them up into gender reveals for children entering into this distorted madness, only to regret, punish, or reject them when they later challenge the norms. It's all driven by unhinged sexual energy, catalyzed by programmed binaries. And for me, and if you're anything like me, romance is full spectrum intimacy. It's revealing, it's vulnerable, and it's deeply alive. But for most others, romance gets funneled quickly into sex and sexuality because survival nervous systems only recognize intimacy when there's an orgasmic payoff. That creates an ongoing disconnect in personal connections. You live in a current of intimacy, but others are only tracking horny peaks. And you live in orgasmic erotic life. And if your mind went straight to the sex gutter, you've missed the point. Orgasm is not just sexual climax. It's a whole life process. It's the meeting of yourself before, during, and after anything. That's what clears the pretentious performing and makes room for actual joy. So yes, it can feel like something is missing when you connect with others because you long to be met in the slow dance of honesty and transparency and intimacy, where intimacy is deepened, not bypassed. That's why, for you, every connection is more of a data collecting observation than a cue to pursue or be pursued. You have to vet whether merging lives makes energetic sense. You need to ensure that everyone involved can stay present before, during, and after, or whether they'll vanish back into survival loops of avoidance, dishonesty, distraction, and resistance. I'm showing you how programmed binary thinking creates clever ways to avoid holding complexity here. Instead of facing the layers of your own experience, we often rebrand them. We call them a mental health disorder. You call it a surge from the moon or the planets, a tower moment in tarot. You call it financial crisis or generational trauma and childhood trauma. Or you can go as surface level as saying that the devil is stealing what God ordained. You will use any and everything as a crutch, not to take responsibility for how deeply codependent we can be on people, places, things, and ideas. All because we're afraid of floating in the void of our own experience, alone, by ourselves, with ourselves. But you are your own universe. You are your own star in the galaxy. You are your own galaxy. You are your own community. You are your own tribe. You are your own preference. You are the larger will for your life. You are the source of both your desperation and your abundance. Every physical thing is just another binary you've been programmed to believe is the whole truth about you. But because multiple truths exist, there is no need to cling so tightly to one. Allow the void to reveal another truth. You can't stop the spin. You can't stop the storm. You can't stop the snowball effect, but you can breathe with the discomfort. You can show compassion to the binary voice judging you for being uncomfortable. That compassion slows down the spiral. So slow down. Keep it slow and steady. In slowing down, you start to notice the types of slowness. This is where safety returns to the body. And with safety, you realize you're not as open to more than one truth as you thought you were. And that realization itself can stagnate the process. But slow doesn't mean bad. There are two types of slowness. You have aligned slowness, which is the patience of real integration. And then you have misaligned slowness, which is avoidance, collapse, projection. When those two clash, your energy takes the hit. That's when you start practicing boundaries and cultivating ways to draw the line in the connection with others. Boundaries get distorted by binary thinking. We're taught that a binary is about an external circumstance, blocking the toxic person, leaving the dangerous situation. But the deeper boundary is always about you. It has everything to do with protecting and uncovering the clarity of your own field. Sometimes what you thought was clarity or what programming told you was clear turns out not to be. And that realization brings self-judgment, self-deprecation, and the awareness that you've been neglecting yourself. That's when the real boundary work begins. Befriending the part of you that's been spewing internal toxicity. Instead of giving your power away to people, behaviors, and circumstances that don't pour back into your energy. Rigid binaries turn every decision into survival math. Right, wrong, good, bad. And if you're in survival mode, every choice becomes a survival choice. That's why resistance, setbacks, and projections feel so heavy. The binary is strong. It feeds itself by telling you what to see, what to feel, and how to segregate things. When you face that binary, you start reclaiming your clarity. You begin to intuitively see that it's been giving you the language to ridicule yourself, to shrink yourself, and to chase external validation instead of cultivating deep internal truth. And the clearer you become, the more responsibility you carry. Clarity itself becomes space holding, even when you don't want it to be. You start holding space for others automatically. The work then is to discern whether the inevitable slowness is aligned mostly or misaligned mostly. That discernment gives you the ability to name what's off, to say it out loud, to write it in a letter, to bring language into the storm, and that language becomes your immunity card, your safety net. Because when you speak the truth of what you see without disguising, without withholding, you clean up your role in the pattern. And yes, you may still feel remnants of someone else's toxicity, but you've reclaimed your power. You've exercised the right to block, delete, archive, and not as avoidance, but as reclamation, reclaiming your backbone, your energy, your time, your money, and your resources. And your breath can be a ritual for that reclamation. In other words, with every conscious inhale, you reclaim your power. And with every conscious exhale, you release the toxic pattern tied to every tether. That rhythm itself is a living, paradoxical, and clear boundary.